From the time we are born, many will be educated to be a version of themselves that please others. Whether it comes from the way you were raised or how you were taught in school, we often learn to put a mask on and be an actor in our life. Unfortunately, that behavior will not lead you to be happy and live a fulfilling life. You can discover the best version of yourself and transform your life so that you are no longer an actor in your life. Choose to live the life that was made for you. In this video, you will have to commit to exploring yourself, try to be aware of your behaviors, and be honest with yourself. No one other than yourself can know who you are. With commitment, vulnerability, and curiosity, you will be able to be the best version of yourself and put away the mask that you've to wear for much too long. Are you ready to claim your power? Then let's start to explore your current life and see how much you are currently your true self. The power you have is to be the best version of yourself you can be so that you can create a better world. Ashley Rickards. Chapter 1. Being yourself. The best version of yourself is being true to yourself, but what does this mean? It is sometimes easier to explain something by identifying what it isn't. That said, here's a list of what is not being the best version of yourself. Being true to yourself is not about pleasing others. Being true to yourself is not about hurting others. Being true to yourself is not about doing things you dislike. Being true to yourself is not about forcing yourself to do something. Being true to yourself is not about being hard on yourself. Being true to yourself is not about judging others and comparing yourself. Being true to yourself is not about being a victim of your surroundings. Being true to yourself is not about acting in a way that will attract more fans on social media. Being true to yourself means that you behave and communicate in complete integrity with your belief, values, and, most of all, with what feels right in your heart. When there is an alignment with your inner self, emotions, states, and desires, and outer self, behaviors, communication, and relationships, you are the best version of yourself. Assessing yourself. Have you ever felt like your behavior and the way that you held yourself varied depending on who is around you and where you are? We tend to play a different role when we are with individuals that we want to please or want to make sure that they like us. For example, you might behave in a completely different way if you are at work or with people you just met and want to be friends with them. We tend to be ourselves when we are at home or with childhood friends. That is when we let our guards down and become more vulnerable and less worried about how others might perceive us. Chapter 2. Projecting yourself. If it is hard for you to say no to others and instead of saying no, you use white lies, which means that you are also able to tell yourself white lies. Being dishonest is one of the most common mistakes we make in life that keeps the best version of ourselves at bay. It takes a long time to realize that the external world is a projection of what is happening internally. Since the external world is a pure reflection of us, it can give us a lot of information about ourselves when we take the time to observe and be aware. For example, if you hate your job, it could be a sign that you technically don't recognize your skills and abilities. That you are unable to clearly see what you are capable of and therefore settle for jobs that you dislike. It's almost like you are creating your own misery. Take a moment to list some of the things that you dislike in your environment. That could be the way that your romantic partner treats you, the way that your family makes you feel about yourself or your professional life. When we learn our triggers, we learn about our true selves and what needs to heal within to be the best version of ourselves. You don't see the world as it is, you see it according to who you are. Stephen Covey. Chapter 3. Learning your triggers. Are there some subjects that you avoid discussing with others because you know you will be angry or frustrated? Do you sometimes find yourself easily offended by others? Learning your triggers will help you to move from being reactive to being at peace with what others think when it is different from your opinion. When we are triggered by something external to us, we tend to blame others for what we are experiencing. Blaming others for our state of mind and situation is living a victim mindset. The faster you can learn to stop reacting to others, the faster your mindset will shift to be more in alignment with your true self. First, you have to accept that the only things you can change in this world are your behavior, your mindset, and your communication style. As you probably know by now, you have no control over other people's behavior or mind. Make a decision now that you will no longer blame your problems on external factors. Second, learn to be aware of your behavior and thoughts, especially when you go in that space of blaming others or reacting to what they do or say. Start by making a list of what you feel trigger you. Now make a plan to react differently in the future when those situations or subjects arise. How will you better handle your emotions in these situations? Being the best version of yourself means that you are taming the shadows that have been following you, sometimes for years. It's not always easy, but when you face your dark side, you bring it to light and immediately allow yourself to shine brighter than ever. It gives you the space to heal deep wounds. Taking responsibility for your own happiness starts by recognizing your responsibility in your life and stop giving your powers to others. When you blame others, you do not own your responsibility in your life. For example, if you continuously blame external factors for the life that you live, you are giving up your powers and will to others. You are allowing others to dictate your behavior and mindset. By doing so, you are entirely detaching yourself from yourself and merely becoming a pawn in life. If you want to be yourself, you have to take ownership of your life. Start by being aware when you blame others for the situation you are in and shift your mindset to solution finding and own the solution that will get you out of a difficult situation. It's time for you to take back your powers and choose to live the life that you want. When you can maintain a healthy mindset and break the bad habit of reacting to anything, you become more at peace within and better apt to be your best self. The feeling of being offended is a warning indicator that is showing you where to look within yourself for unresolved issues. Bryant McGill. Chapter 4, Knocking Down Your Barriers. There are plenty of reasons why a person would not want to be themselves fully. According to the physician and psychiatrist Dr. John Pierakis, there are main experiences that create barriers to be our true selves. These barriers are 5 wounds, were popularized by the famous French author, Lise Bourbeau. Those wounds are abandonment, rejection, injustice, humiliation, and betrayal. Rejection Rejection is a profound wound because the one who suffers from it feels rejected in his being and especially in his right to exist. Therefore, it is practically impossible to be yourself when you wear that wound. It is not unusual for people who feel rejected to have a fleeing physique, that is to say, a body or a part of the body that seems to want to disappear or become very small. As if the receding person wanted to go unnoticed for fear of being rejected. In terms of behavior, they often doubt their right to exist. They seek solitude because if they receive a lot of attention, they would be afraid of not knowing what to do. They can be fleeing, which is why they prefer not to get attached to material things because they would prevent them from running away. They often wonder what they are doing on this planet and finds it hard to believe that they could be happy here and bring something to this world. They don't know what to do with themselves when they get too much attention. In relationships with others, they are constantly finding ways to seek love from the parent of the same sex and will reject themselves from a person of the other sex, often feeling guilty when they face rejection. It is not unusual for them to live in ambivalence. When they are accepted, they won't believe it and often create a self-sabotaging situation so that others reject them. Their biggest fear is panic and anxiety because that often arises in them when they are rejected. Injustice. The wound related to injustice is intimately linked to the wound of rejection. While rejection touches deeply the being, the wound of injustice touches on having and doing. People who have that wound often has a body rigid and as perfect as possible. They have a well-proportioned body, rigid movements, stiff neck, and very proud. They are usually lively persons with dynamic movements, but who is rigid and lacks flexibility. Often a perfectionist and envious. These persons tend to cut themselves off from their feelings and often cross their arms. They try to be perfect and justifies themselves a lot. They find it difficult to admit that they have problems. They often doubt their choices. They like order and tend to control themselves by demanding a lot from each other. They can be angry and cold and has difficulty showing affection. They don't want to be late but will often be delayed because they take a long time to prepare. It is often difficult for people with the injustice wound to accept compliments, help, or gifts from others because they feel in debt toward the person after. Their biggest fear is when others are cold toward them because that awakens the unfairness but is also a reflection of their shadow. Humiliation. This wound is mostly related to the physical aspect of having and doing. Most individuals with the humiliation wound have a larger and round body, round face, with a broad and rounded neck. They are often ashamed of themselves and others or afraid to shame others. They think they are dirty or unclean. They don't want to recognize and assume their sensuality and their love of the pleasures associated with the senses. That is why they often compensate and reward themselves with food. And they gain weight quickly to give themselves a reason not to enjoy their senses. They are also afraid of being punished if they enjoy life too much. So, they ignore their freedom by putting the needs of others before their own, so that they stop enjoying life. Most individuals with the humiliation wound want to do everything for others. In reality, they want to create constraints and obligations for themselves to stop enjoying their freedom and life. This lack of enjoyment reinforces the feeling of being abused and humiliated. And in the same way, they tend to demean and humiliate others by making them feel that they cannot do it alone without them. They are often inclined to blame themselves for everything and even take the blame for others. Their biggest fear is their freedom. They are afraid to lose the ability to be themselves when humiliated by others. Abandonment. The wound experienced in the case of abandonment is the second deepest after that of rejection because they both affect the being at a profound level. Most people with the abandonment wound lack tonus. Their body is usually long and slender with a back that becomes rounded and sagging. As if the spine and muscles were not able to keep the body upright. Their body seems to need help to hold on. Those who suffer from abandonment do not feel emotionally nourished enough. They need constant help and support. They think that they cannot do anything on their own and regularly need someone to support them. They often have ups and downs. For a while, they are happy, and everything is fine, and suddenly, they feel unhappy and sad. They tend to dramatize a lot. The smallest little incident takes on gigantic proportions. In a group, they like to talk about themselves and often brings everything back to them. Besides, they usually seek the opinion or approval of others before making decisions. They can't make up their mind, or they doubt their choice when they don't feel supported by someone else. And when they do something for someone, they do it with the expectation of a return of affection. Their problems give them the gift of attention, and this prevents them from being abandoned. The more a person acts like a victim, the more his or her abandonment wound increases. Their greatest fear is loneliness since it is directly connected to that feeling of being abandoned. Betrayal or treason. The wound of betrayal is intimately related to the wound of abandonment. While abandonment is about being, the wound of betrayal is about having and doing. Their body often exhibits strength and power. In men, shoulders wider than the lower body. In women, lower body larger than the shoulders, pear-shaped body. The higher the asymmetry between the upper and lower body, the greater the betrayal wound. Very uncompromising, they want to show others what they are capable of. They often interrupt and respond before a person is finished. When things don't go fast enough to their liking, they become angry. They consider themselves hardworking and responsible. They struggle with laziness. They hate not being trusted and do not always keep their commitments and promises or forces themselves to keep them. They tend to be impatient and intolerant. They confide with difficulty and do not show their vulnerability. People with a betrayal wound have great difficulty accepting the cowardice of others. They also have trouble delegating tasks while trusting others. Among the 5 wounds, the betrayal wounded is the one who has the most expectations towards others because he likes to foresee and control everything. Unlike abandonment wounded who has expectations of others because they want to be loved and supported in their abandonment injury, the expectations of the betrayal wounded are to check that others do what they need to do well to verify if they can trust them. They firmly state what they believe and expect others to agree with their beliefs. They tend to state their point of view categorically and seeks to convince others at all costs. They think that when someone understands them, they agree with them, which unfortunately is not always the case. Their biggest fears are disengagement, separation, dissociation, and denial, which are often experienced in a situation of betrayal. It is essential to know what your wounds are to identify your limits and what obstacles stop you from being your true self. By being aware of your behaviors and wounds, you are getting to know yourself better and also understanding why you tend to behave in specific ways. Maybe one of your wounds is betrayal, and you get very insecure in your relationship when your partner doesn't live up to your expectations. By knowing that about yourself, you can learn to improve the relationship and how you react to certain situations. The first step to heal your wounds is to observe yourself when you feel hurt. Chapter 10 will help you with that. Then you can move on to accept that you aren't perfect, and it's okay to recognize the hurt. Last is to admit your fear and allow yourself to move through that fear by being vulnerable and honest with yourself and others. Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Henry Ford.